Listen, there's a lot left to do in Albany, not a lot of time to do it in. The current session is set to end June 17th, and the New York Times editorial board, they had identified 6 major issues that were still up in the air, and you see them right there on your screen. I want to talk about it. I want to start with the battle over mayoral control of New York City schools. Who wins this one?
Depends what you mean by wins. It won't disappear. I don't think it'll be made permanent. I'm not so sure it should be made permanent. That list, there's plenty of time. These deals are not made at the last second by people running into a room and saying, now what do we do? Mm-hmm. They've been pounding on each other for 6 months. Whether there's the political will or the consensus, public policy consensus, to do any of them is a much harder question.
However, there is a time aspect, which is
4 of them don't.
We're almost in June right now. If there will be mayoral control of the schools, there would be changes that would need to be implemented before the fall, obviously, if they're going to try and put their thumbprint in terms of...
New York City, it's an extended. It's new for places like Buffalo, maybe Yonkers or Syracuse. So the easy, peaceful solution is to extend New York City law and let everybody else hang on the margins.
2 interesting tax issues, which is the property tax cap, 2%, and basically, as it relates to parochial schools, really parochial schools here, that tax break, if you will, or that application of funds that you could put towards it. We've debated both of these issues here. It seems that there's a growing will for the break, let's say, for the private schools, right? Because it's capped at really, I think, the income of the household. So this wouldn't be going for people at highfalutin, upper-end private schools. This is really more for parochial schools or yeshivas or whatever else. I think the support for that. I'm not sure on the property tax cap how much there is across the board. What do you get?
I think the support for the property tax cap, I think there's support, at least on the Republican side and Governor Cuomo, on the tax credit for schools. I think Richard and I discussed this offline. I think the DREAM Act is probably tied into that, and I don't think there's any support for the DREAM Act within the Republican conference. So I don't know whether that goes or not.
This question of the tuition tax credit, the parochial school tax credit, is one of those things where ideology, ideas, and positions are as much in play as politics. There are large numbers of people, especially in the Assembly, who believe that public funds should be spent on public schools. Put aside whether they're right or wrong, it's going to be very hard to move a majority of those people over to the, okay, we'll give tax credits for private and parochial schools as well.
And I don't want to debate. I don't want to debate it on the merits, good or bad. But I would only say I think there's a distinction with a difference here, because it's not some blanket thing, regardless of whatever private schools you go to, ergo the credit. It's capped, I think, at $500. We're talking about schools and modest incomes for the households. I support it. I think it makes sense here.
Camel's nose under the tent. The concern is not the terms and conditions of the deal, but you're setting a precedent. And, you know, look, one of us will be right, one of us will be wrong, but I just don't think the votes are there yet.
I think the teachers' unions will weigh in on that and try to exert their influence as best
they
can.
have on one side, the hedge fund guys on the other.
I understand.
Raise the age, Andrew. We've had this issue. We've talked about it in RFL before here as it relates to sentencing with minors. New York State, really one of only 2 in the country that do this. It seems like its time has come. I mean, since when do we want to be in the bottom 2 in America when it comes to New York, of all places? Do you think it gets done?
I mean, I think that might have the best chance of anything that was on that list, only because I don't think there's a groundswell of opposition to it. So I think it's got a chance. The question is, you know, how much horse trading has to go on and how much time there is before the clock runs out on it.
I think it's one of those issues that needs to kick around the legislature for a few years. I think there's a lot of merit to it, but it's more complicated than it sounds. You have to build facilities. There's a lot that has to go into it. I don't think it passes this session.
Hey, tell us how the sausage gets made here. In that, is this all part of an omnibus thing? Do they do these one at a time?
The big ugly, is that what they call it?
Well, you got to be careful, because both things are true. It tends to get thrown in because it's sort of a guarantee that I'll get my things if I do your things, as opposed to doing them separately and then having somebody say the votes weren't there. So there is a reason to package. But the individual negotiations for individual items, big ones or little ones, comes over the course of many months with members deeply involved and the leadership having to reflect what they hear in the conference.
Okay, now that last point about the leadership, how much does this get further complicated given all the tumult that's in Albany with the Skellos and the Silvers and all the rest, and
There's
new
been
people in
tumult in
different
Albany?
roles?
Tumult.
Yes.
He used to wrestle, right?
Okay.
I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. The real issue here is that the governor has used his budgetary power in the budget process to force the legislature to do things it doesn't want to do. Now he comes to a process where he doesn't have this bizarre constitutional ability to deny the legislature the right to
Right.
amend. He's got to like be a regular negotiator. I'm not so sure he likes that. And for better or worse, I just don't think the stars are aligned to do many big controversial things for a whole host of reasons. But the indictments are not, I don't think, central to
So, just curious, with 3 weeks out or even less, do they already kind of know how this ends up, or is it really, it could go either way?
No, they know what the agenda is. For example,
No, do they know how
when
the
things are
final things will
expiring,
look like for the most part?
No, and they don't till the end, because there's trading going on, which is not an immoral activity. I will be able to move my conference on the issue of tuition tax credits if you're able to move your conference on the DREAM Act. That conversation will take place. I believe the Republican Senate will not move on the DREAM Act. I believe the Democratic Assembly will eventually not move on the tuition tax credit. And I think they'll die, they'll both be in one coffin, but they'll be dead.
Can I just change my prediction to say nothing gets done? Is that
That's
the
not-
safe
You
You know
answer?
what, to be
That'd be
fair,
the
safe
things
answer.
lately have gotten done, and that's
I'm betting-
many ways you could take that in Albany,
extenders
but they
will-
do.
The extenders
Yeah.
will happen. I mean, the mail control will continue, 421A in the city
Yeah.
will continue. The extenders will happen.
Stuff will happen.
All right, when we come back here, an interesting question for the table. Is President Obama more liberal than President Clinton was, or are his policies just a sign of the times and a very different time than the 90s? We'll get into that after this.